Hey everyone, just want to say hello as everybody streams in. We'll take a couple minutes and just make sure everybody gets here. All right, so this is what we're going to be talking about in today's webinar, solar and wind GADS at scale. Basically, we're just going to talk about going from your PI SCADA data to actually getting audit ready submissions. So the whole part of automation, what you should be doing, how to do it, and going into more detail. We do this with a ton of clients, and just want to walk through that process because we often get questions. And if you have a couple of renewable units, after a few, it gets very annoying to do it. So thank you everyone for joining. Today we will be talking about solar and wind GADS at scale. So this is really going from your inverter data or doesn't necessarily have to be inverter. It can be turbine as well, but we're going to focus more on solar today, um, and discuss how to go from your PI or SCADA data to having audit ready data for submissions. And this is really going to be talking about automation. Um, So more or less, as we go through this, if you have any questions, just put it in the Q&A and Aditya will kind of alert me. And if not, you can also email us. Uh, if you've seen the LinkedIn, just message Aditya on LinkedIn and he'll give you the information, or I'll have, I'll also put emails here for Aditya as well in a little bit. So, all right. So general issues, right? What are we going to get out of this? Number one, why is scaling needed, right? Um, how to scale or automate, you have to understand the process. And really, when you're doing this and automating, you're going to break this down into two pieces, the performance data and the event data. This one is truly just more data gathering and automation exercise, whereas this one is a lot more complicated and there's a bit of a human piece to it. And there's, when you're doing this to go from your Pi and SCADA data, right? You're going to take those values every 5 minutes or so, let's say. If not, you're going to do it at every 10 minutes. And for solar, you can have, tons of different tags, right? The AC switches, breaker switches, number of inverters online, output for the total plant, output per inverter. So if you have a lot of inverters, it's a lot of data, right? So the whole process is that we want to take that data and converted it into inverter outages. Then we have to know whether were you out for planned or unplanned. Generally, depending on your OEM equipment, you may be setting tags, you may not, or somebody may have to manually figure that out. Or what we often do is we'll also look at your real-time outages and, mostly if you're in an ISO or RTO, you've had to send that to them. And during those times, if there's outages, we can assume that those are related to, um, you know, the a planned outage or planned derate that you've put into this to the ISO or RTO. And then the rest of the events we can assume are going to be forced events. So we'll walk through all of that detail. And that's just the beginning of the fun, because once you have that, then you have to transfer and use an algorithm to take those and create them into NERC events, because it's not a one for one and it can get very complicated. So that's kind of the end of the session goals, and we'll have a Q&A in case people have questions, but I do encourage questions as we move. Thank you. On here. All right, so I'm gonna go back. Aditya, I'm not sure if you lost me for a second, but
Yeah, we
uh,
lost you
um,
for a minute. Yeah.
okay, great. So, all right, we're still good. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna be talking a lot about solar. Before we do that, just so you know who we are, I'm Amit Patel from Integ Enterprise Consulting. I work with a ton of utilities. And I'm usually, working on automation or helping with new initiatives and compliance. And nowadays, a lot of the work is how some of our AI and other solutions can help them, scale quicker, easier, and whatnot. So we are in the US, Canada, Europe. We do have some clients in Asia as well, not a ton, but I generally work in, the US, Canada regions. So I've been around working for over 2 decades as well with Integ and in the energy industry. We have a ton of blue chip clients. Every ISO RTO uh, that has GADS uses Integ's GADS system. We've also got some of the largest utilities, a ton of co-ops as our clients, and a lot of, uh, one-off owners of generation that are not publicly traded or utility companies as well. So, and we have a suite of solutions. Today I'm going to be talking about GADS. I'm not going to go into, this is not going to show you what our solutions do. This will be more focused on how you can do this for yourself. So if you do want to talk about this, we can do that. You can contact us through our website at www.integconsulting.com and ask for a demo, but we don't want this to be salesy. So we're going to really just focus on the core content and how you can do your automation if you want to do it yourself. But if you are interested, we do have this out of the box where we can automate a lot of all of this for you if you have, a lot of solar units or a lot of solar and wind units as well. So let's start with kind of the end game, right? What is a fully automated solution look like? Where what's going to happen is that you're going to have I'm showing you when solar is the same. I'll show you that in a minute. Is that all of you have two things you have to do for NERC, right? You're going to be submitting your performance data and you're going to be submitting your event data. Performance data, you come up with it for the entire month. It's one set of values. Event data, a lot more complicated. We'll get into that. You can have a ton of outages. They can all go into one outage, two outages, five outages, depends on how you want to do things. And then within that outage, you're going to have to just review it, make sure the cause code looks good, and do something called a contributing operating condition. This may or may not be able to be automated, but we always ask clients to do this. So if you have, 40 units, you may have to look through this, let's say 50 set of events in total, make sure everything's okay. If everything's okay, then you're going to press a button, create the file, submit it to NERC, and you can be on your way. So if you're not doing this, if you have a lot of units, you could be spending hundreds of hours, right? So the difference between automation and not automation is hundreds of hours versus few hours. And I have folks where people are hand building the record, right? You have to look at the data, look at the outages, and just I want to be very careful, and this is not to just say it for the sake of saying it or alarm, but almost nearly every time we've done this and we have folks that were doing it manually and they start doing the automation, we find that when they were going from the outage events to the algorithm events, it was incorrect in places. And actually, they weren't even capturing all the outages. So please, it's okay to do it by hand if you're still doing it, but make sure that it is audit ready. If NERC comes, that you can, make sure you give them that it's done properly, because almost everyone I see has issues, right? It's error prone. And this is difficult to scale. If you've got, 10, 20, 30 units, it's going to be hard to do this by hand. So definitely recommend automation. It's just easy. It's a lot more consistent and it scales clearly. I have clients with 60, 70 renewables units, and they're not able to do this without automation. So, but even more than a few, it gets to be a lot of work. And especially if you want to do it properly and correctly. So the question now is that where should you be, right? Before scaling. Um, Obviously, you want to make sure that, you're going to start collecting the data. You have all of this and you've done this manually at least once, right? If you haven't, you can still start from scratch and just do an automated system, but then you're going to have to go through a bunch of these, and I'll try to go through this. And you'll also have to make sure you're gonna get an ID from NERC if you don't have it, and log in and make sure you take care of the certificates, all of that, which I will not go into today. If you do have problems or questions, we'll help you with that. Again, any issues or concerns you have, you can email us. There's no cost for any of that. We're happy to help. You don't have to be a client. Doing these webinars, I've had probably 25 companies reach out to me and we've helped them. Some of them actually ended up becoming clients, but we've helped a ton of them regardless. So, just let us know. We're happy to help. And if there's something we don't have, then, or it's very confusing, we can work with NERC with as well on these. And so. All right. So once you do this, right, if you want to automate, either you're going to have to, link to your PI SCADA system, and sometimes you also link to the ISO RTO systems, or get the data that's going to be needed into some sort of file that can be used. So, you're going to have your sensor data, right? You're going to have your irradiance, your AC switches, DC switches, how much, each inverter is generating, all of that information. So we're going to have to obtain that from PI, SCADA, or you're going to have to provide it in a file or something. Then once that file is there, right, you will have to transform and process that data. And this, I'll walk through. I won't be able to go into full detail because we don't have enough time today. This is a long, long thing, but the whole goal is that you want to create inverter outages, right? So let's say you have a solar unit with 72 inverters. Well, you have to look at data for each of those, right? And in this data, you're going to get, let's say, not 5 minute even, let's say you're going to 10 minutes, but you could be getting, tons and tons of tags, right? Because you have to look at the different AC DC switches, you have to look at each of the inverters. So you could be getting 100 something tags per 10 minutes, right? So, and you multiply that by, that's just 600 for the hour, and then 24, you're going to have, 1200 something, and then you need it for all 700, hours, all of that. So it ends up scaling into millions and hundreds of millions, depending on how many records you're getting. So it's a lot of data. And the whole goal for us is that we want to know when that inverter is out. We don't care about if that inverter is derated. Remember, we're not looking at the plant level, we're looking at the inverter level. And once we have those outages, then we can have a human review. Generally, the human review is done later, but you can double check that everything looks good. And there's a few nuances that I'll go into as you get, once you create these outages, first you have to know whether they're forced or planned. Often there may be tags, or we look at ISO RTO because you had to actually tell them if you have forced or well, sorry, when you have planned events, you have to tell them ahead of time. So that should have been put in there so we can use that to automatically label it. Because often you may get hundreds of these things, right? If I look here, right, I'm gonna go and I'm looking at my inverter events, right? So by the way, this is all my inverter events that are going on. And from there, it ended up creating, one, two, whatever, 10 something solar events. But I have hundreds and hundreds of issues going on with all these different inverters, right? And if you notice when this came in, the system was able to use the fault data to automatically assign a cost code of what was going on. And it knew when it started and when it ended. And it, by default, it puts us as a forced outage. Now, if, let's say, during this period, this was a planned event, well, I need to know, right? Somehow, either from looking at the ISO RTO data, or if there's an alarm or something that was put into SCADA and I could see it in PI that you're doing maintenance. This way I can automate all of this, because if you don't today, somebody would have to review all of these and see when it was, maintained. And for our purposes, what we do is that when you're doing all of this, we're able to let the users know and say, look, if you've got a bunch of things happening where it's not going to add up to where it's material for NERC, then you don't need to go review those events if you don't want to. And so even within the manual review, right, we're automating everything. But even after the automation, if some event missed the cause code or something, we alert them to just that, because you don't want people going through, hundreds and hundreds of events. The whole purpose of the automation should be that you simplify everything as much as possible with what you have. Now, with that being said, some companies do things differently and they may want folks looking at each one of those things. But either way, having an automated solution will really, really simplify things, where you go from data to human review to creating the NERC file very easily and quickly. So just keep in mind, you'll have different systems and you can do this differently, using whatever tools and means of automation you want. I really won't go into that. Or like I said, you can purchase an off-the-shelf system like ours that will integrate and can do the automation for you. Before we go into the what is scaling, let me know if anybody has any questions. All right, so let me move on. All right, so again, we went through what the final output should look like. It should be clean, you have everything, and hopefully you double check within a few buttons, you can submit to NERC and you're ready to go. So part of this is that you're going to take millions of data points, you're going to clean it, transform it, and then you're going to have some sort of synthesis algorithm to take the outages that are inverter outages. And again, you could do the same thing with wind. So, and put them into NERC events. I'll walk through that. And I'll also walk through, when you do this, there's two pieces, right? You have this information that's the performance, and then events. The performance is mostly gathering the data from your underlying system, summing it up, and there's parts where you have to bucket it based on, whether something was, what state it was in, whether it was in maintenance or not. That's the complicated part of this. You need this information to be able to do that. But if you take that part out, which you'll be doing here, then the rest of it is mostly getting the right tags and summing things and knowing what tags to do and how to calculate it. That's mostly it. So the events and part of what's related to the events where you're bucketing the hours, that is the most complicated part of this process. So, all right. So part of this is that I won't go into all of this, right? Just what I want to understand, you to understand, right, is that you're going to have tons of these inverter events. These need to translate into NERC events. This is not a one-to-one. That's, and you have to be careful. So I'll walk through the rules, but first of all, if you see this line, you have to go 20 megawatts below your forced outages to start reporting. So, but then where it gets complicated is if you started, right, where things started going, see, this came here, but then it kept going and it ended here. So you have to sum all of this up, and it ends when you get to like 95% of the lowest portion. So it's not easy to do. You really need to do it in some sort of automated way to do it properly. Now I see folks doing it, and they're doing it actually incorrectly often at this point. I'm not going to go into that or identify who's doing that, but there are folks doing it, and it's actually been flat out wrong. But hopefully all of you have gone through and you're following the NERC manual and what needs to be done with these inverter events. And I'll go through and tell you where some of these common pitfalls are as well in a little bit. So yeah, again, all these things, you can have a ton of these, and it could result, this one resulted in 2 outages, but you had so many different things going on over time. And these were, it was like I think total for 450 inverter outages individual, and then it turned into 2 events, right? So just have to know how to do this properly. So number one is, making sure that what are the best PI and SCADA points. So for solar, you are going to want to, obviously you need the inverter level generation. You need the total plant level generation. You need the irradiance as much as possible, depending, on your systems. You may not have it for everything. You're going to have AC, DC switches, that, all of that data. Um, that's just for events, but then to fill in the performance data, you're going to have to find each of the tags that fill it in, and I'll walk you through that in a little bit. You also have to figure out when you have missing data, right? What are you going to do with it? Um, and if there's big chunks missing, you're going to have to alert the user, right? Because it's either that something was out or the tag was out. But then if the tag was out, then what are you going to do? You have to have a strategy to fill that in. We generally automate that, but then there's an issue if you're not doing the automation. But still, in this case, you should say, hey, this thing was out for a good part of the month, and let the user know that they should just double check everything, even with what the system's created automatically. And then you're going to have with some data like chatter, and you have to, sometimes your breaker on, off, on, off, on, off, and you have to know when you're getting that and be able to clean all of that up so you get accurate, reliable data. Otherwise, it's just going to be garbage in, garbage out. And remember, you're getting a ton of data here, so you have to make sure that you're getting clean quality data at the end of the day. A lot of the work is just upfront. When you're first setting these units up, you have to check carefully, do a lot of testing and review. Once you do it, then it's set it and forget it, right? Whereas if you're doing it manually, you're kind of repeating the same because you could have issues, and it's just so much more work that, even though it is effort initially in the automation to do all these checks, it is totally worth it because afterwards, you're really going to have very reliable, accurate output. So I won't go into this. Like I said, in certain cases, people are not sure how to do this, how to test because they're coming from a different place, or with automation. They're not sure how to do the automation and how to test it, because it is a lot of data, right? The only thing is, if you're not the subject matter expert, then you really have to have somebody that knows it. Often engineers, solar engineers are going to be the best folks. So somebody that can get the data in and then process it, and understand the NERC rules. So if you have folks that's a solar engineer and then they understand the NERC rules and they understand how the data is stored, that's the best, group, whether that's one person, which rarely it is, or two people or three people. You're going to have that SME that knows the tags. You're going to have that solar engineer that understands everything, and they may know the tags and understand what NERC wants. And I'm here to help today with, understanding some of what NERC wants, helping you understand what NERC wants. Um, so, all right, some of these are from earlier. So, like I said, there's no simple path from raw data to a NERC event because, like I said, the inverter events do not equal NERC events always, right? Actually, most often. So, and then you could also do this where you did something in March, but then if something was happening in February, remember, even when you create these, you have to go down to the lowest point and then get like 95 or whatever percentages of that to see where the event ends. So it gets very complicated, and this is way more complicated than fossil. And this is where, half the people messing things up happens where it's incorrect. Um, so yeah, like I said, there's no simple way, but I'll walk you through, and you're going to write some sort of algorithm to do this if you're going to automate it. So again, you're going to start with your PI and SCADA generation, and not just generation. You're going to get a bunch of other data that you're going to need: fault, switch status, other info, and different breaker switches, AC, DC, all of those types of things. And then what needs to happen, right, is we're going to use all of that data to figure out, okay, let's just say we only had three inverters. We have to know which inverters are out fully. Okay, we don't care about deratings, but we want to know which inverters are out. If inverters are out, then we can sum all of the inverters that are out. And then let's say there was a planned event going on. We don't care about planned event. We only care about forced events. This green is all forced events. So if you had planned events on top, the force goes below that. And then what we're looking at, right, is that you're going to put all of these outages together, and then where you have the system X amount, right, the first 20 megawatts or whatnot, then NERC is going to care, and that's where you have to start reporting all of these things. Once this happens, once you go below 20 megawatts of force loss, problem is, when do you end it? Because you have an out. And so as you start, you have to keep going until you hit a low. And you can't go back, and you keep moving forward until you hit no more lows. And each time you have a low, you have to see, okay, am I hitting 95% where 95% of this is back, right? And the loss is still greater than equal to 20 megawatts. And the loss is less than equal to 20 megawatts, right? So you're going to have to figure out where 95% of this thing is, and go from there. So I won't go too much into it. This is in the NERC manual. But again, the data that you should be getting should be every 5 minutes, if not every 10 minutes. So you have to make sure that the data is at that scale. The NERC manual does say 5 minutes, but we've spoken to them, and if you just don't have 5 minutes easily, then they'll accept the 10 minutes, and you can double check with them also if you want yourself. So now the problem is, again, as these events happen, right? So, once you go into, this was a 100 megawatt unit. Well, we're going lower, 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 and this is all cumulative effects of inverters, and they could be going in and out, right? It's not just all of them going out. Once you go below 80, it starts, right? But then if this peak is here, then depending that the event's going to end at a certain point. So you have to keep looking at that and see how this is happening. Then the next part of this is that if you look, right, if I look at this and I want to update this event, well, I have a cost code. Now, for us, we got the fault data and we automatically created it, but you could also do this and you could give every inverter event and a cost code and say, okay, I'm going to pick, what the largest set of cost codes are for this, right? So once you do this, internally, you should verify that this cost code is correct. And then if the cost code is correct and your NERC event has been created, then you can also check this contributing condition. You just want to make sure there's nothing weather related, weather, including floods, wildfires, any of that. This is very important because for NERC, it's going to really matter. And then how big this derating was, what the loss, your system should have calculated that however you're doing it. And it's going to be a sum of, kind of this this whole area of what happened. But since you have a start and an end, even though, things may have been irregular, what happens when I'm showing this is that it's going to be, a block. But in reality, it's not a block. I'm just showing this because that's the easiest way to show it here. And with NERC, you're going to have one loss for that period. You're not there. They don't care that, you went up and down and all of that type of stuff, right? It's basically the area under the curve that this is summing up to over time. So again, just really, I would focus on creating the events. It is, that's going to be the hardest part. Also, the other thing I want to point out is that as you do this, you have to have sunrise and sunset times, right? Because without that, it's going to cause issues. And again, these are just some of the inverter level tags that we're using and getting. And all right, so let's talk a little bit about the performance. I'm going to try to go through this quickly. And I'll just do the inverters. We're not going to do the turbines, but okay. So all of these things are basic. Entity ID, plan ID. These are the IDs NERC gives you. This is the month and year you're reporting for. The status is generally something that, you're either active or you're mothballed. If you're mothballed, you're not going to care. So, and then you're going to get into a bunch of these generation values. Again, these are all just summary. If you have your 5 or 10 minute values, you're just going to sum them up. Your net max capacity is going to be something that, it's going to be a consistent value. This is going to be your irradiance summed up over the month. Just make sure you use this unit of measure. Performance ratio, I won't go into it, but you should have it. If not, you have to check the NERC manual on how to calculate it. Generally, it comes from the PI or SCADA system. We have had to calculate it on certain conditions. This is expected generation. And this is all based on weather. This is not, most folks are calculating a default expected generation. But you have to look at the NERC formula. Again, I won't go too much into it. And if you can't do this, then still you can talk to NERC and they may accept other ways. And then active solar hours, I'll go into all of these in a little bit, but this is where you're gonna, when you have outages, right, you're gonna bucket these things, or when you're not, don't have outages, right? So either active or inactive or mothballed or retired or any of those types of things. So you have to get all of these types of things where, you know, I'm sorry, the active is more because we have to know the um, GADS, the hours, so sunrise and sunset. So between these, you're going to be active, and on the other hours, you're inactive. All right, and then you're going to have service hour. This is when you're running. This is when you're shut down and you're not running for economic reasons. Again, you're going to need to know from, your system data when this is happening. Now, this force maintenance plan, once you have your outages, like I said, you have to weigh, everything is forced by default, but often there's maintenance and plan. So either you go in and manually and figure those out, but then you have to do it at an inverter level, or you have automation that can help you and with this. And then the resource unavailable is, and these are all between day and night as well. So this is when you had no sun, right? So, and then you have other values that are at night. And again, day and night are going to be based on this. So you should have each plant daily sunrise, sunset hours. And then you'll know from there how many hours are there daytime and nighttime. So Right, that's the performance. We kind of walk through some of the wind, and then if you do want a demo, or actually if you have any questions, we'll be happy to help. Just reach out to Aiden, and he'll work with you. He'll put you in touch with myself or somebody else. Most likely it'll be somebody else, but he'll put you in touch. Or you can, if you've talked to Aditya or talk to us on LinkedIn, you can just send a message through there and we'll be happy to help you. And there's no cost, even if it takes a couple of sessions. Again, this is not, we're not looking for consulting or anything, just looking to give back, help where we can. And like I said, I've helped probably close to 25 companies with their questions and whatnot. So, and a bunch of other individuals who just messaged on LinkedIn. So I'll kind of stop here. I think it'll be hard to get in. The rest of it is just very detailed to get into the automation part. So I'll kind of stop here. Hopefully that helps you all. And if not, this was meant more where I'm just going to talk about it, but you guys will have a lot of questions and a lot of nitty-gritty to go into. So yeah, hopefully this helped everyone. I'll kind of end here if there's no more questions. Thank you.